conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there and happy Friday to you. It's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry. Coming up tonight, migrant marquees, tent cities, basically, some people calling them a sensible solution to the migrant crisis. Other people saying awful, inhumane, concentration camps and all the rest of it. What says you on that? It's Tony Blair. Brace yourself, he's been speaking sense today, everybody. He's saying, how can Britain solve the climate crisis ultimately without China? He says they can't, and I say he's right. But what do you make to the whole Tony Blair situation, though? Is he trying to make edge into getting back into frontline politics in this country? And if he did, would you support him? And have you heard of the so-called ghost children? COVID, apparently many children didn't return to school after it. What's going on? There's concerns now that we are tiptoeing towards a huge crime wave caused by these children. Is that true? Why are kids not returning to schools? By the way, when you see some of the stuff that's getting taught in schools, I don't blamed some parents for taking their children far away from them anyway. Over in mid-Bedfordshire, Nadine Dorres, do you remember, she resigned. She said she was going to go immediately. Well, Flintwick Town Council are saying, go on then, off you go, because of course she has not gone anywhere. Do you think she should? Should there be a by-election? Should she be allowed to resign and basically do absolutely nothing about it? Your thoughts on all of that? We'll have it all to come. But first, shall we get the headlines with Tatiana Sanchez?
Michelle, thank you very much and good evening. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. Plans to move 2,000 migrants to RAF Scampton in Lincolnshire have been delayed until October. Officials had indicated the first group would begin arriving at the former airbase in August. It comes as the Home Office is reportedly preparing to erect marquees to accommodate 2,000 people at the Manston airfield in Kent by the end of August. There are warnings it could trigger legal challenges based on inhumane treatment. The ultra-low emission zone is set to be expanded in London after a High Court ruled the plan is lawful. Legal action was brought by 5 Conservative-led councils. It means drivers will pay a £12.50 daily fee if their vehicles do not meet the required emission standards. A spokesperson for the AA says the ruling is hugely disappointing, but it hopes London will follow other cities by adopting measures to reduce the impact on those who can't afford it. The London Mayor Sadiq Khan says there will be support.
The decision to expand the ultra-low emission zone was a difficult one, not one I took lightly, but it's essential. Next week, there'll be a massive expansion of the support we give to families, to businesses and charities. As it is, 96% of cars in inner London are compliant. 9 out of 10 cars in outer London are compliant. They won't pay a penny more from August 29th, but we'll see the benefits of clean air. But I'll carry on listening to see what more support we can give.
The Chancellor says no decisions have been made on compensation for victims of the contaminated blood scandal. Thousands of people contracted HIV and hepatitis after being given contaminated blood products in the 1970s and 80s. Jeremy Hunt told the official Infected Blood Inquiry the injustice is being addressed.
We totally understand the urgency of this situation. You know, we recognise the fact that, as I think I wrote in a letter before I was Chancellor, that one person is dying approximately every 4 days, and that there is a need for justice to be as quick as possible for what has been a terrible scandal.
A 14-year-old boy has been arrested following a hit-and-run in Walsall. A 7-year-old girl was taken to hospital in a critical condition but later died of her injuries. Police say the incident happened shortly after 7 o'clock yesterday evening. They're now looking for a blue and black motorcycle. The teenager remains in custody. NatWest has appointed a law firm to conduct an independent review following the closure of Nigel Farage's bank account. It comes as the banking group announces profits of £3.6 billion for the first half of the year. Both the group's CEO, Dame Alison Rose, and Coutts boss Peter Flavel resigned this week. Former Bank of England and Treasury advisor Dr Roger Gievald told GB News any bank bosses who wrongfully closed people's accounts should be fired.
I think there should be an investigation. Mr. Griffith, the city minister, should, I would suggest, start an investigation immediately, not next year with the paper that we get in, you know, when our grandchildren can read it. Next week, into every bank that did this, and over the last several years, has canceled people and closed their accounts without reason, and any directors or officers or management involved in that should go.
Former US President Donald Trump and 2 of his employees are facing new charges in the classified documents case. It's claimed Trump ordered employees at his Florida resort to delete security videos whilst he was under investigation for retaining classified documents. The former president now faces 40 charges in the case. Trump's team say this is nothing more than a continued desperate attempt by the Biden crime family to harass Donald Trump. Holidaymakers affected by wildfires in Greece say they're struggling to get refunds. Despite the fires that are ravaging the island of Rhodes, some airlines are continuing to operate flights, meaning that travellers are unable to claim their money back. Thousands of British tourists have been evacuated from the island. The Foreign Office is advising those travelling to fire-affected areas to be cautious. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now it's back to Michelle.
Thanks for that, Tatiana. I'm Michelle Dewberry till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, filmmaker and the director of youth education charity World Right, Kerry Dingle, and the writer and broadcaster Paul Embry. Welcome to both of you, and welcome back. I've not seen you for a little while. Nice to have you. You know the drill as well, don't you, on Dewbs & Co? It's not just about us three. It is about you at home. What's on your mind tonight? Nearly the weekend, yes. Do weekends mean anything to you, or is it just another day? Do you have to go out and work tomorrow anyway? Get in touch with me tonight, gbviews at gbnews.com, or you can tweet me at GB News. I'm running a poll as well on Twitter. I'm fascinated as to your thoughts on Nadine Dorries. Of course, she announced her resignation with immediate effect, apparently. Well, that was back in June, and nothing really has happened since. And now one of the town councils has said that she should resign and leave with immediate effect and trigger a by-election. What says you? On Twitter, Luke says, if you publicly announce your intentions to step down, you automatically become unqualified for public office, he says. We should have our MPs prepared to fight for communities, and we should expect nothing less. What are your thoughts on that? If you're on Twitter, jump on board. Let me know your thoughts on that poll, and I'll be coming to that topic before the end of the programme. But for now, the Home Office in trouble again. I don't think a week goes by, quite frankly, when Suella Braverman isn't in trouble for something, but today it's her idea to get tents, marquees, whatever you want to call them. It's all about trying to, I would say, contingency plan, because the weather, I mean, it's supposed to be summer, isn't it? We're supposed to have nice weather. I'm sure it's coming, but the nicer the weather, the more people inclined to cross. So she's trying to be proactive, trying to be front-footed, rather than have to buy lots of last-minute hotel rooms. She's got a brainwave of basically these marquees that will house up to 2,000 people. These will be potentially on military bases. What do you make to them? Paul Embry, I shall start with you.
I don't object to them ideologically. I think the key thing is, look, you know, the people coming over, whatever we might think about the collapse of a proper immigration system, I mean, these people are human beings. They need to be treated as human beings. We need to make sure that they are housed in conditions that are safe, that are secure, where they've got the basic amenities that are necessary. Now, whether that's a hotel, I don't have a particular issue with that. Whether it's a...
What, you don't have an issue with people being in hotels?
No, I don't, because for me, Michelle...
Four-star hotels, you think that's fine?
Because for me, that's never been the main issue here. And I think the problem is that when people get into the debate about, oh, well, we're putting them up in hotels, for me, that's a distraction from the central issue. Look, when people come here, whether they come here legally or not, they're human beings once they arrive, and they need to be housed in secure and safe accommodation. You know, we can't just leave people homeless. Well, we do leave people...
I was just about to say, well, we do.
We do, and we should be ashamed of it, but we shouldn't leave people homeless. So for me, whether or not it's a hotel, you know, whether it's a Premier Inn or whether it's a 4 or 5 star hotel, whatever, or whether it's a marquee which is decent and safe and secure and has the basic amenities, for me, it's not the issue. The issue is, and I don't think, by the way, that the individual migrants should be targeted. I'm not in favour of demonstrations outside of migrant hostels and stuff like that. For me, the issue is how we got to a situation where our immigration system, frankly, has collapsed, where we cannot control our borders. Despite the many promises from government that they will address the situation, they haven't. And nobody seems to have any ideas in terms of how to address that. That for everybody in the country, and there are millions who have got issues over, you know, the poor regulation of our immigration system, that should be where the focus should lie, rather than, I think, debates about hotels and stuff.
Yeah, I've got to say, I've got a problem with hotels being used in this way. You say, oh, 4 or 5 star hotels, whatever. I think it's an absolute scandal. I think it's a disgrace that £7 million or thereabouts a day is spent on hotels. This whole situation about the marquees, if this was going to be your idea, then why wasn't it implemented quite some time ago to save those wasting of money in the hotels in the first place? But anyway, Kerry, what do you make to it all?
Well, I do think Paul's got an important point, that it's immigration's become an unhealthy obsession. The problem with the obsession is that not only does it have anti-human consequences, but it doesn't deal with the problem. And the problem is people risking their necks getting on small boats. And I think that's an absolute human disaster and a tragedy.
But it's also a human choice, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's willful. But the thing is, we haven't thought about how to stop that. And whether I have no problem with tents, you know, I think it's ridiculous that people have come out and said this is concentration camps and all the rest of it. That's nonsense. I think being in a tent can be great. So I think that's rubbish. But we aren't dealing with it. And I think we have to deal with it in a much more rational way. Instead of millions on hotels, we could be employing loads of graduates to deal with the 75,000 who've been waiting nearly 3 years to get processed. They're being given vouchers and money and accommodation, and it's not being dealt with. That's scandalous. We're not providing legal routes, which we could then say, go through the legal process. These people are able to secure money to pay people with boats, so go through the legal routes like friends of mine have from Ghana and from Kenya and from elsewhere, and they'll do it legally. If you get turned down, that's it. You're not going to get anything. It's a criminal offence.
What do you mean when you say there's an unhealthy obsession with immigration? What do you mean?
Well, it's, you know, if every day, you know, whether it's the tents and yesterday it's the barges and another day it's something else, you know, the government failing to fix this means they are dumping people in all sorts of places unhealthily, you know, a whole load of men on a military base in a small village.
I thought you meant it's unhealthy to discuss this issue. I thought that's what you meant.
No, I think we should discuss this issue, but I think we should discuss proper solutions, actually. And also, I would say I don't see immigrants as a big problem in Britain. I think our failure to deal with people drowning is a big problem.
Would you be in favour of open borders, though, Kerry?
Yeah, I've always supported open borders.
Well, hang on, but I need to just rewind. Where do I even begin? Right, first and foremost, you just said our failure to deal with people drowning. What are you talking about?
People getting on small boats and risking their neck or climbing under lorries.
But that's not our responsibility, is it? If a grown adult decides to do that.
Yeah, but well, the trouble is it does become our responsibility and we need to prevent that happening. Don't we want to do that? Or would we rather have to spend loads of money and create havoc in small villages with no resources?
And then, did you just say to Paul that you're in favour of open borders?
I've always supported open borders because I've always thought that the arguments about as open as possible, I suppose, would be how I'd put it, according to people's democratic wish. You know, I wouldn't be for forcing it on anyone, so I didn't like, you know, the attempt to open up Europe and force people right to come here on working class people as though they needed a lesson in anti-racism, because that was the tenor of that debate at the time. But I've never thought numbers, population numbers, were the big problem in Britain.
I think it is the problem, though, because I think when you speak to most mainstream people in this country, I think the view of ordinary people, by and large, is that they are pro-immigration. They understand the benefits of immigration. They don't think, you know, we want to shut the gates. No one should be allowed in. But at the same time, people believe that the system has got to be regulated properly and the system has got to be managed properly and the numbers have got to be modest. And if they see that that system is being managed properly and the numbers are modest, I think people are much more inclined to say, yeah, this is OK, we can absorb this, we're comfortable with this, we can live with this. I think what's happened in this country is about 20, 25 years ago under the Blair government, where he adopted a very liberal immigration policy. And then we had EU accession in 2004 with the Eastern European countries. And all of a sudden, we did see a very, very rapid and large-scale increase in the numbers. And we had no means of integrating these people. We had no idea about how to integrate these people. We had no proper dispersal policy. And generally what happened, Kerry, is working-class areas were told, OK, you're going to deal with this. Because invariably what happens is when poorer immigrants come, they will invariably go to working-class areas. And working-class areas that were already hard-pressed. And people were told, look, suck this up, you can deal with this. And, you know what, you shouldn't really complain because it will enrich you in an economic sense, it will enrich you in a cultural sense.
Paul, I don't disagree with you.
And people actually
I don't disagree with you on these points. You're missing the point.
Didn't feel enriched at all.
The point about limits, yeah, is not about, you know, did people want all these people to come over? Were they put upon by Blair? They were, in order to educate them as, you know, oh, you've got all these working class bigoted people, let's just let immigrants come in and they can suck it up. The problem I've always felt with is that the argument about too many people in Britain, too many people in the world, the overpopulation idea means that instead of fighting to grow the cake and create more so that we could all have more, you limit it and you very easily target the other.
How do you grow an island?
I don't mean grow a landmass, Michelle. I mean grow the resources that we've got.
Yes, but this country is a certain amount of size, full stop, and it's a certain amounts of density at with the population as it stands at the moment. We've got a certain amount of infrastructure as it stands at the moment. So what?
But we haven't got massive population growth, immigration or no immigration. Actually, we've got a falling birth rate. And there wasn't immigrants that caused the lack of housing or immigrants that caused crappy education, or immigrants that put people out of jobs, and that's the limits argument.
But the truth,
too many people
the truth is, though, Kerry, you're right. It would be absurd for someone to say that an immigrant has put me out of a job, or
Hang on, why would that be absurd?
Well,
because when the EU expanded to the Eastern Bloc and a lot of Polish people came in, for example, there would be a lot of British plumbers that were out of business because they were undercharged. Well, not undercharged, but there were cheaper rates by the Polish plumbers.
No, I get that. I get that. What I'm saying is, Michelle, it would be unfair to target an individual immigrant and to say that you are responsible for putting me out of a job. I think that is the completely wrong way to go about it. I think that the people responsible, and, of course we can say, well, OK, we're not going to blame immigrants personally for the fact that wages are under pressure or housing's under pressure, etc. But there can't be any serious doubt, surely, that if you have a very liberal immigration policy, as we've had in this country for at least the last 20 years, and we haven't invested properly in infrastructure, and we haven't, done all of the things that are necessary in terms of improving and increasing the housing supply to accommodate that, then of course it is going to impact. And it doesn't mean the individual personal immigrants are responsible, but it does mean that the government is responsible. The truth is, if with wages, for example, if you have what Marx called a reserve army of labour, which is waiting there to fill your space, then invariably employers are going to think, well, this gives me the opportunity to hold down wages, because if that person doesn't want to do it for this wage, then I've got people coming in who will be prepared to do it for that wage. So employers, for example, will always be under less pressure to deliver better wages the larger the labour supply that is available to them.
And there will be people at home shouting at the tellies. I can hear you all the way from my seat here, and you'll be shouting about population growth when people say, well, it's not expanded the population. Of course, we had net migration of, I think, 606,000 people in the last year alone. Anyway, you tell me what you make to that situation and what is the solution, because we do go around in circles. We seem to be chipping away at the edges when it comes to harebrained schemes here, there and everywhere. But, until you stop people making that journey, as Kerry says, ultimately this problem is going absolutely nowhere. Next up, I want to talk about Tony Blair. He has been out and about today speaking about climate change, saying that ultimately passing all of these little measures, like very expensive measures, onto us to try and fix climate change will be irrelevant unless China follows suit and makes big changes. Is he right? You tell me.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry with you until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, the filmmaker and the director of youth education charity World Right, Kerry Dingle, and the writer and broadcaster Paul Embry. Lots of you guys getting in touch about that last conversation. There doesn't seem to be a huge pushback against the tents. You don't seem to be echoing those calls where people are saying it's inhumane and all the rest of it. I'm always fascinated though by what are the answers, because how you accommodate people once they've got here is one thing, but how do you prevent people getting here, or choosing to come here, should I say, in the first place? That is $1 million question. What's your answer to it? Get in touch and let me know. Now, former Prime Minister Tony Blair, he has been speaking out on the climate debate, he reckons, and I've got to say, I actually agree with him on this point, but what he's saying is that we're doing all this net zero stuff here. All of us are having to incur extra costs on various different bits and pieces. And what is the point of it? And actually, we do all this, eat less meat, drive different cars, tinker with our boilers and whatever it is, so on and so forth. But if China changed nothing, then it's all a little bit irrelevant, is it not? Kerry, I'll start with you on this one. I agree with him. Do you think he makes a good point or not?
Well, I think a lot of things that we're doing are nonsense, and I do think we should have a referendum on net zero, because I think most of that is nonsense. But he's also fact light, is Blair, because China leads the way. It's the world leader in solar panels. It's got access and is now the world leader in rare earth minerals. That's what they need to make batteries. It's head of the game in electric cars. So even though overall China has more emissions because of its vast population, it's way ahead on the climate change front. So it's very fact-like what he's saying. And the thing is that Blair, I can't believe a word he says, to be honest, but he is pontificating on the world stage and trying to find ways to, I think, back Starmer after the Uxbridge revolt over ULEZ, really. And I think you've got to understand that Blair isn't someone who questions the austerity measures that come with the apocalypse nightmare that we're supposed to be facing, which I think is rubbish. He goes along with those things. I was in Ghana when Blair was going around Africa telling poor people they shouldn't have what we have with his sustainababble, you know.
But it is whatever they're doing that's good, and I'm sure it's all fascinating, but the facts do remain that they do produce about 28% of the world's global emissions when it comes to carbon dioxide, and that is a problem. And I guess this is his point. We're all being told, add this onto your bill for green levies here, eat less meat, we're going to do this with your cars and all the rest of it. For what? Because if those emissions don't come down, then it is kind of irrelevant.
But there's also, I think there's another, we have to dig, I think, further beneath the surface, not just look at the amount of emissions, because global warming in some regards has got positive benefits. You know, there are far less deaths from heat than the 60,000 deaths that happen from cold, for example, that happened between 2000 and 2019. 60-odd thousand deaths from cold, 2,000 from heat. Global warming can be good, and carbon emissions are necessary in terms of a greener planet. So we should just calm down about climate change. I'm not a climate change sceptic or denier, but I think we should get it in perspective and think about what do we want? What sort of society do we want? And what do people need? And that is more energy, more development globally, ability to grow our economy so we can better meet people's needs, and less of this hysteria about apocalyptic climate change, whether it's on a global level.
Global boiling, I heard it called today, not global warming, global boiling. Paul, your thoughts?
I think every now and then Tony Blair, who's clearly not an unintelligent guy and is a good political operator, he will come out with something where it's quite profound and it's quite sensible and you think people really ought to listen to him. I think the difficulty the guy's got, to be blunt, is I think Iraq has pretty much destroyed his credibility largely. So whenever he does, hold forth on great global issues like this, people are just inclined to go, yeah, but you took us into that disastrous war in Iraq. It was an absolute calamity, the biggest foreign policy blunder in this country since Suez, arguably including Suez. So we're not going to listen to you, mate. So in that...
Well, people do listen to him because the Tony Blair Institute is huge. It has something like 60 million revenue last year. It's got hundreds of staff. They talk about being embedded in government.
Yeah, some people within the upper echelons of society undoubtedly do listen to him. I think some of them, including in the Labour Party, would like to see him back in charge, to be perfectly honest. And
would you?
No, I certainly wouldn't. And foreign governments as well, I think, especially on the continent, will listen to him. But I do think he's right on this, that we need to be careful about inflicting a huge amount of punishment on ourselves when, in fact, in terms of global emissions, what we actually produce and what we might save in terms of global emissions is going to be a drop in the ocean on a global level. So I think there's an argument to say, look, why are we putting the country through this? And mainly it's going to be ordinary people who are going to pay the price of it. When we know renewables are unreliable, when we could go to a cliff edge transition, all of that, what that might mean in terms of jobs and industries going out of business and the lights going out and people not being able to heat their houses and stuff. So there does seem to be this kind of mad rush. And the way that I would describe it is, I think we should all be environmentalists. I'm as green as the next person, but where we should have embraced, if you like, moderate environmentalism, what we've done is we've embraced militant environmentalism.
But do you do all your recycling, and do you do all the stuff that you should be doing to make yourself as kind of, whatever the word is, carbon neutral or whatever it is?
Yeah, I do what I think most families probably do in this country. I'll recycle and
why do we need to be
I'll make sure I turn the lights off if no one's using them.
There's no movement to destroy the planet. There's nobody around, no viewer will be thinking, oh, I'd really like to screw things up for the environment. That doesn't exist. So why be an environmentalist? Well, is the world really about to, expire?
No, and that's not my point.
So why are we... Not. You're right. We are being put through, green austerity. What on earth for?
For the greater good. So some would argue, the environmentalists would sit here and say that actually, if they would argue that man-made climate change is a thing, and if man make changes to their habits and their behaviours right now, then for the greater good in the long term, that will be a positive thing.
I think for the greater good in the long term, and there is an anthropomorphic effect, there is a human effect, what we need is more money, more development, so that we can offset the effects, so that we can have, if we need them, air conditioning, so that we can have, nicer vehicles and better development. So, you know what I mean? So it's development that can offset these problems. People at the moment are dying in Algeria and Tunisia. They're not dying in the more developed parts of the world where there's a heat wave. And that's purely about development.
What do you make to it all? I've got to say that there's a few people here saying they share your view about Tony Blair and his credibility and all the rest of it. I always struggle to listen to climate lectures about how much I have to change my life, whether it's the cars or the food or whatever it is, my flying or whatever. I always struggle to take advice from people that think it's absolutely cool to get into private jets and go jetting around the world, to have conferences and conversations with their best friends and their allies and all the rest of it. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just being a little bit childish, but there's just something about that that, because if you want me to change my habits, then why don't you lead by example? That's what I always think. Anyway, let's talk kids after the break, shall we? So many of them are now absent from school. What is going on? I want to have a look at that, but we've been talking about climate change. It'd be rude, wouldn't it, not to look at the weather?
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Hope you were able to enjoy some of the sunnier spells we did see around today, but into the weekend there is the increasing chance that we see some showers, and that is all thanks to this area of low pressure that is pushing its way in from the northwest. Those isobars squeezing together, so it will turn quite blustery into the weekend as well, and those frontal systems that you saw bringing in swaves of showers. First thing during the overnight period for parts of western Scotland down into northern England and Wales. Also the potential for another band pushing across southeast England. Just some uncertainty in regards to the positioning of that one, but definitely some heavy pulses of rain possible first thing on Saturday. Not going to be a cold night at all, actually pretty mild in the southeast, but slightly fresher further towards the west, lows of around 12 to 13 degrees Celsius. Saturday then turns into a day of sunshine and showers for the vast majority of us, particularly for Northern Ireland and Western Scotland. That's where we'll see the most frequent showers, potential for those to turn heavy with some hail and thunderstorms as well. With those blustery winds, though, across all areas, those showers will be pushing through relatively quickly, so still some sunny spells around, and in that sunshine, climbing to highs between 19 and 24 degrees Celsius. That main low pressure centre stays with us through Sunday as well. Some heavier showers for southern Scotland down into northern England, but we're then focusing our attention on this area of rain that's going to start pushing its way in from the southwest. Again, got to watch the exact timings of that, but certainly could turn quite damp for Wales, southwest England later on. Further showers into the new week as well. That's all for now. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Cool, blimey, nothing says we are the height of summer more than that forecast, did it? Did you see it? Crikey. Right, after the break, I want to talk to you about Nadine Dorries. I'm running a Twitter poll. Get on board and let me know whether or not you think she should have to stand down. She said she was going to, and now Flintwick Town Council say it's time for her to go. Do you agree or not?
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, filmmaker and director of Youth Education charity Wellsright, Kerry Dingle, and the writer and broadcaster Paul Embry. Ray just said, Michelle, you're talking about China and all of their emissions, but you're not pointing out that that is because that they manufacture everything. You're absolutely right. I've made this point often, and I ponder, do you think people would be able or willing to pay more for our goods if it was not to be manufactured in China? I don't know, I don't know if people would, but anyway, get in touch and let me know your thoughts. Let's talk, shall we? Children, missing children, to be precise, when it comes to education, because the Centre for Social Justice think tank, they've now warned that the failure to get children back to school after the pandemic could lead to a rise in violent offenders. Now, when it comes to absenteeism, it apparently has doubled since the pandemic. Get this, everyone, 1.7 million pupils now miss at least 10% of their school time. When you kind of calculate this up, what they're now saying, that this could potentially lead to about 9,000 more young offenders by 2027. What do you make of this, Kerry?
Well, I do have a problem with this report. Not that that there isn't huge absenteeism, and in fact, there's 1,700 parents are prosecuted every month, which I didn't know until I read that today, for not getting their kids into school, which is extraordinary. So absenteeism is a massive problem. But the thing is, the way this report is framed is that if we don't get these kids into education, they're going to go into crime. And yet again, we're instrumentalising education. So schools are not holding cells or crime-busting labs and machines. They're where we need to make knowledge and education challenging and exciting, not boring behaviour control units, which is what they've become. So I think that's the problem with this report. But also, we also need to recognise the government, and not helped by the teaching unions, are responsible for pushing for schools to shut during the pandemic, not taking kids' education seriously, and, going along with the idea that schools are these kind of social reform institutions rather than centres of knowledge, which is what we want.
Yeah, but what they'll say is that the devil makes work for idle hands. So if you've got all these kids not going to school, so they're not in there from 9 till 3 or whatever the time of your particular school is, then what are they doing then? And that will be the argument, that they will say that if they're not going to those schools, they're not being proactively engaged with something positive, then the likelihood and the probability of them getting, going into the streets, hanging around with people that they shouldn't be, that would be their concern.
Yeah, but I don't think we should see education as a way to stop kids being criminals. This happens to me. You go for a grant and you have to write a report, and they say, well, if young people work with you and touch a camera, will it stop them doing drugs or crime? And I'm like, I've got no idea, because I don't teach young people to make films to ensure that they're not criminals in the future. They might go to Peru and fall in love. They might become millionaires. Who knows? The point is, education is not about turning young people just into being the people you might like to hang out with. And I also think it's wrong to think, I think we need to do everything we can to inspire kids to get back into school. And we do need every possible, idea and thing that we can muster to encourage them back from absenteeism. But I think this is not the way to do it, by saying, oh my God, they'll become criminals. Just because you're idle doesn't make you a criminal. You go around the developing world where people are a lot of them that I know are illiterate, they're not criminals. It's not true.
Paul?
But I do think we need to look at what the evidence says, though, Kerry. And if the evidence says there is a clear correlation between particularly persistent absenteeism
says likely.
in school.
It's not causal.
Well, OK, but if there's a correlation doesn't have to be causal, of course, but if there's a correlation between absenteeism on the one hand and the chances of people, or a link to people committing crime in their later life, then I don't think we can be blasé about it and say, oh, well, we'll just kind of dismiss that. We don't think there's any link and it's not the job of educators to stop people becoming criminals. I mean, of course, it's not the job of educators to stop people becoming criminals. I accept that.
Very well-educated people are criminals.
Well, I don't doubt it.
There's very ignorant people who are criminals.
I don't doubt it.
Nonsense.
I don't doubt it. But the point is, though, Kerry, if the evidence shows a correlation between one and the other, if the evidence shows that the more time as a youngster you spend away from school, the greater the likelihood that you are to become a criminal, then I think we need to confront that and we need to address it and we need to say, well, actually, OK, well, surely it's a good idea that we do what we can to encourage kids to get back into school. The same way as
wouldn't you want to encourage kids getting back into school regardless of crime statistics? So why are you fetishising on something? There isn't even a correlation. They haven't measured all the young criminals in youth offending institutions and seen how many of them missed how many days, 10% of their education. It's just not factual.
It doesn't have to be one or the other. Of course, we want youngsters to be in school anyway, but we have a greater duty, I think, to say we need to make sure they're in school if the likelihood is that they're more likely to turn to crime. And we have this debate as well, by the way. I mean, I'm on the left and people run a mile from this debate on the left, but we should have this debate about family breakdown as well, because the truth is that the evidence, every study you want to cite will show that youngsters who come from a broken home are more likely to, for example, turn to crime. They're more likely to have alcohol issues, drug issues, that sort of thing, get worse educational outcomes. Now, we can say, well, actually, that's nothing to do with us. And, of course, people from broken homes are not always going to end up in that way. Of course, we accept that. But if there's a correlation between the two, I think that does put a duty on us to say, actually, we need to address that then and not to run away from the evidence because it's kind of a bit inconvenient.
I don't have a problem with addressing the problem of family breakup and the impact that has on kids. And I certainly don't have a problem with addressing absenteeism, which is a serious problem. What I have a problem with is seeing education as a means to stop people becoming criminals, because I just think it's nonsense.
But I don't think, to be fair, I don't even think that the people who have written the report are making that point. I don't think they're suggesting that, the only reason people should go to school with, teenagers, youngsters, whatever, should go to school is because it's going to stop them becoming criminals. I think, of course, everyone sensible will accept that by itself it's important that people go to school for their own benefit in terms of flowering their own knowledge and education and whatever. But if an added reason for doing that is because you can break the link between not going to school and crime, then that's a good reason to do it as well.
Well, I'm going to give you at home the final word on that. What do you make to it? Who do you agree with? And if you are a parent, how comfortable are you at these days with your schooling and your kids? Do you happily send them off there, or do you worry perhaps what on earth they are getting taught these days in those places? I know that I would. Anyway, your thoughts, GBNews at GBNews.com. After the break, I'm asking you about Nadine Dorries. She said she was going to resign as an MP, but yet she has not. Should she go, force a by-election or not?
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Filmmaker and director of Youth Education charity World Rights, Kerry Dingle, is alongside me, as is the writer and broadcaster Paul Embry. It's Friday, that means that Dewberry Tavern is open, so cheers everybody. Cheers to you at home to your weekend. Bill, we've just been talking about Tony Blair and about climate change. Bill said, nobody voted for net zero, Michelle, let's have a referendum. But Bill, you did. If you can't see Kerry there, she's cheering you on there from the sidelines with your point. But, Bill, we did vote. When you actually look at the manifestos in 2019, net zero was in them. I hate to break it to you. Ray says, Michelle, if Tony Blair is the answer, then clearly somebody is asking the wrong question. I wouldn't trust him, he says. Richard says, I would never thought I would have agreed on Tony Blair on anything, but I agree with him strongly on climate change. And Kelvin says, again, I never thought I'd agree with Tony Blair, but on this, he is bob on. Val says, about children, isn't it time that the parents took responsibility for the kids instead of the state when it comes to them being criminals or not? Danny says, if children don't attend school, lock up the parents. Well, I was one of those kids, barely used to go to school. My mum had no idea. I'd hate the thought that she was locked up. And if she, I don't think she would have been able to make me go, quite frankly. But anyway.
Did you play truant, Michelle? I cannot believe
swagging,
that.
yeah, we used to call it, yeah.
Wow.
Swagging, and one day
Bunked off, we used to call it, bunked
my mum
off.
caught me one day in the park and she chased me around the duck pond. I'll never forget. As long as I live, I remember my mum chased. It was like a Benny Hill sketch. My mother clapped eyes on me, was chasing me around this pond to try and get hold of me. I was too quick for her though, she didn't manage it. Anyway, I was asking you about Nadine Dorries. We'll all be familiar with the fact that she resigned her seat in Mid-Bedfordshire, but she didn't go anywhere. She said she was going on the 9th of June. Now, Flintwick Town Council has written a letter to her saying, in essence, basically, rather than representing your constituents, the council is saying basically that she's more focused on her television show and media career and all the rest of it. They think that she should go. And I've been asking you guys on Twitter throughout the programme, do you think that she should go or not? And I have to say I'm really surprised by the result, because about 58% of you said yes, you think that she should go, and only 42% of you said no, she shouldn't. I thought the results would have been much, much higher in terms of more people saying that she should go. What I find interesting is someone on Twitter is saying she shouldn't go until she gets the answers from Sunak about why she didn't get the damehood. And of course, that is why Nadine is saying that she won't go, because she wants these answers. I think it's a bit rich though, Kerry. And I do sit here and I just think, who do you think you are? You're not 12, you're not at school. These are people's lives and livelihoods and well-beings that you are responsible for in part when you become a Member of Parliament. And Flintwick Council, they're basically saying that she's not spoken out in the Commons for quite some time. She's not held a surgery in her area. And they're saying that she's not performing the role the way that she ought to. What do you make to it all?
I think it's appalling, and absolutely she should go. She hasn't even had a constituency, surgery in 3 years. Who does this woman think she is? I think it's shocking. Yeah, of course, you can see that for her it's all about a fairly narcissistic power trip as she wants to join the medieval anti-democratic House of Lords, which I've got no time for either. And it's hanging on for that. After we've... I find it absolutely appalling. She doesn't represent her community, and obviously her constituency would vote her out, but they need the opportunity to do that, and I think it's disgraceful.
Paul?
I think she is treating her constituents with contempt. I think it must be the greatest honour to be elected by thousands of people to be their representative in Parliament, and I think to repay those people in the way that she is doing, which is essentially to make them pawns in a Tory tribal war, I think shows enormous disrespect to those people who have sent her to Parliament, aside from the fact that she's clearly not an effective MP at the moment because her attentions are elsewhere. She's got all sorts of personal stuff with a TV show and a book and a Daily Mail column and whatever else she's doing. But she's just not an effective MP. She's not holding surgeries. And just the very idea that you should treat your constituency like that when they've done you the honour of sending you to Parliament, I think is appalling. And she announced, whenever it was, back at the beginning of June, I think it was, that she was going to go and she was going to resign with immediate effect. She hasn't done it, and, she ought to do it. If she's got any honour, she ought to do it immediately.
Well, John says, Michelle, you know full well why she hasn't gone. It's all because she didn't get her honours. Yes, I know why she hasn't gone, but what I'm saying is I disagree with that, John. I think what happens, is I think... you're supposed to be a public servant and you're supposed to exist, if you like, in your public office to serve the people that you represent, those people that voted you in. And I think what happens in today's society, some of these MPs, they go on telly and they get these presenting roles. I'm not really massively sure that I think that serving MPs should have TV presenting positions, but that's a different conversation altogether and just my view. But I think when they get them, I think it goes to their head a little bit. And sometimes I think that they start to think that they are these celebrities. And I think they lose themselves, and that clouds them.
She always portrayed herself as, a bit of an outsider. She was, where there was the Tory party are full of, the elites and the aristocracy and, rich people, and she was from much more sort of humble beginnings, and she was working class. Well, to be perfectly blunt, she is displaying the same kind of sense of entitlement that many people would think that other people at the top of the Tory party have got. So actually she's not as humble and she's not as modest as perhaps she's making out.
There's a lot of support for her in the inbox, though. A lot of people are saying that she's right in what she's doing. Why should she go, they're asking, if she's not got the answer as to why she was denied. But where does this entire...
Why should people like her, why should people like her have this... get to sit in this undemocratic institution, get £300 a day just for walking through the door and all the expenses on the top. And by the way, Nadine Dorries, as we know, was really dodgy in terms of the MP expenses scandal. Never mind other things. But I think Paul is right. I think whether you're from working class origins or a toff from Eton, if you don't treat your constituents seriously, if you don't stand on principle and have people with you that you relate to and behind you in your constituency, it's very easy to get on a career power trip, and she's on one.
Well, there you go. Your thoughts on that. A lot of people in my inbox are saying you do stand by her and you think it was wrong that Sunak blocked her. Alison says, which park was it? He was running around East Park or Pickering Park? It was Costello. That will mean absolutely nothing to anyone that's not from Hull, but it'll mean something to Alison.
Not Boothby Park.
Anyway, no, Boothby Park was Hull City's former football ground. It used to be built above a Quick Save shopping centre, a supermarket. I used to work in that Quick Save, so I did. Anyway, a trip down memory lane. Lovely. That's what you want at the start of your
All our
weekend.
yesterdays.
Yeah, Paul and Kerry, thank you very much for your company. Thank you at home for yours too. Have yourself an absolutely fantastic weekend, whatever you are doing. I will be back on Monday. Do not go anywhere. You've got Lawrence Fox coming up and also next Lee Anderson. See you on Monday.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Hope you were able to enjoy some of the sunnier spells we did see around today, but into the weekend there is the increasing chance that we see some showers, and that is all thanks to this area of low pressure that is pushing its way in from the northwest. Those isobars squeezing together, so will turn quite blustery into the weekend as well, and those frontal systems that you saw bringing in swaves of showers. First thing during the overnight period for parts of western Scotland down into northern England and Wales. Also the potential for another